Hello and welcome to Context. I'm Katie Wilson. Today we turn our attention to the future of Gaza, specifically what would happen if Israel were to assume full physical control of the territory. As fighting continues, senior Israeli officials have hinted that military operations may not end with Hamas's defeat, but rather with a more permanent Israeli presence on the ground. Such a move would represent a seismic shift. Since Israel's unilateral withdrawal in 2005, Israel has maintained a security blockade but avoided direct governance. A return to full occupation would leave Israel responsible for the lives of over 2 million Palestinians, amid rubble, ruined infrastructure, and a population reeling from months of bombardment. Critics, including some within Israel's own defence establishment, argue this would be a strategic miscalculation, triggering long-term insurgency, economic drain, and international condemnation. Meanwhile, Egypt and Jordan have expressed alarm, warning of regional instability and the potential collapse of diplomatic progress made in recent years. So, is full control even viable, and what would it cost politically? Joining me today to discuss this are two geopolitical analysts, Onur Erim from Istanbul and Gustavo Aristegui in Rabat. Thanks for joining us, gentlemen. Now, Mr. Erim, I'd like to start with you, and I'd like to take a step back a bit. So, we're talking about Israel assuming full physical control of Gaza. How likely actually is this scenario?
Normally, if you asked me this question a couple of years ago, I would have absolutely refuted the idea. But unfortunately, in the last couple of years, what Israel was able to do and was able to get away with, and moreover, was allowed by especially USA and the other Western European nations, what they were allowed to get away with, I could see that anything being possible. At this point in time. Unfortunately, as you were prepping the question regarding the issue, you asked, several different angles of questions, very rightly so. However, we're not even discussing anymore the moral side of this or the justice side of this. We are now discussing Israeli forces, IDF forces, whether it would be a good idea to go occupy another country inhabited by Palestinians for more than thousands of years. And we're discussing anything but the justice part, anything but the moral part. So, simple answer to your question is, how likely is it that they could do this? I could see right now, unfortunately, they could very well do this with all the things that they got away with in the last several years, especially. I'm not even going back in history. So unfortunately, this seems very possible. I hope for the sake of peace in Palestine, for the sake of peace in the region, and moreover, which is something everybody overlooks, for the sake of peace everywhere around the globe, this does not happen, that there is a justified solution where people can, the inhabitants of a country can keep their country and can self-determine, hopefully, sooner than later.
Now, Ambassador, let me bring you in. So, Mr. Erim sees this scenario as something that's quite likely. In your view, what are some of the other possible scenarios for Gaza? And do you think the change in the US administration has emboldened some sectors of the Knesset to push for this scenario, to push for a takeover?
Well, in the first place, one has to realize that Israel is not a homogeneous society, and that this government does not enjoy overall support in the Israeli society. We're seeing some very strong demonstrations and protests against this government, which is sustained by the most right-wing elements of the Knesset. Of course, there are some moderates, like the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who used to be a member of Likud and broke away because of strong disagreements with Prime Minister Netanyahu, for obvious reasons. In any case, there are other political possibilities in Israel that need to be envisaged and that could very well take place. In my opinion, the internal political situation of the present coalition and the judicial legal troubles of the prime minister are pushing him to do things that he would have not dreamt of doing had he not have these kind of serious judicial, let's call it panorama. In my opinion, he is prolonging the war or the operations in Gaza in an artificial way, just perhaps to prevent or to avoid the judicial consequences that he is facing and that have nothing to do with this war or any other war for that much, but because of the suspicion of wrongdoing and corruption. Secondly, there is going to be an investigation as to what happened on October 7th and why even the observers on the border were not listened to. Even some were victims, as we all know. Today, the father of one of the soldiers that was crying out loud in the radio to her superiors at 4 a.m. in the morning, hours before the assault happened, the terrorist attacks happened, was not even given credit. So there is something to be researched and investigated as to how October 7th happened and whose responsibility it was. Of course, the ultimate responsibility is the responsibility of the terrorists. Second thing, in 1994, the Israelis signed an agreement with the Palestinian Authority accepting the beginning of an autonomy project that was called Gaza and Jericho First. That was never really implemented, and only very recently, when Israel withdrew entirely from Gaza, was the self-rule of Gaza entirely given back to the ANP. In 2007, Hamas won the election, and of course, after that, as all jihadist groups do, they never summoned or called for an election again. There is a first and a last. There's never again, with a jihadist group, an election. Thirdly, of course, the attitude and policies of the President Trump administration have probably emboldened the Prime Minister, but that doesn't mean that the rest of the international community is in agreement with what is going on. I was listening to my interlocutor and his analysis, and he is putting everybody in the same sack. And I am sorry to say, A, that is not true, and B, it is completely unfair. There are many countries in Western Europe that do not agree with what is going on. Of course, they do not agree with Hamas either. We're not going to put the state of Israel and Hamas on equal footage, because that would be a complete disarray intellectually and legally. But let's put it this way. Even some countries like France or Spain, although I'm not in agreement with the Prime Minister Sanchez on his recognition of the untimely recognition of the state. It should have been done before, or wait until the conflict is over. Italy, the Netherlands, and so many others that are not in agreement with the excesses that have been committed, but do seriously condemn what Hamas has been doing. Because, I mean, of course, the atrocities that were committed by Hamas may not probably justify the overreaction, but it needs to be noted that Hamas has been using the Palestinian people in Gaza as human shields. Of course, this does not justify, for example, the recent assumption of responsibility by the Israeli authorities of the killing of the paramedics, saying that there were some mistakes committed and some very serious cases of military disobedience. And lastly, I do think that one must think in midterm and long-term scenarios. This administration is not going to last forever, and the two-state solution will come back on the table sooner rather than later, because it's the only way out to this massacre. But for this to happen, and this is very important that we underline this, for a two-state solution to be viable, on top of a moderate or not radical Israeli government being in power, it needs to be stated that Hamas and other jihadist organizations need to be neutralized. And anybody that supports or justifies Hamas is committing a very serious mistake, if not something worse.
Thank you for your insights there. Mr. Erim, let me come back to you. So, Ambassador Aristigui has described the two-state solution as the only way out. What's your view on the two-state solution? Do you think we've got hope for it, or do you think that model is something that's out of date at the moment?
Well, there are obviously several other spots around the world that face maybe not similar, but the same problem in nature, where two-state solutions are called for or is opted for. In general, I don't usually see the two-state solutions, especially in areas like Palestine, as a viable and/or sustainable option. However, is it far better than what is going on right now? Absolutely. It could definitely be probably the most reasonable first step to trying to sustain an area with peace and hopefully in the future with harmony. However, as I said, I don't, in cases like these, I don't see a two-state solution as very sustainable for the long term. But having said that, I definitely do agree that it is probably the only reasonable first step that could be taken to bring some kind of a, humane, living conditions to the people of Gaza, to the people of Palestine, and not just in Gaza. We keep talking about Gaza, but we're talking about an entire nation being carved up by the IDF, by the Israelis over time. But shall we start with Gaza? Yes. Could it be started with a two-state solution? It absolutely should. But I just see that as a first step in trying to establish a ground for a longer lasting peace. I don't think it's an area that we could ever, realistically, I think, dream for an everlasting peace, but at least a reasonably long lasting peace. And yes, I do agree that should be the first step. But as of now, and for quite some time, for especially Netanyahu's being the prime minister, as the ambassador said, for his own purposes, for his own good, or for his own well-being, he's been trying to make sure to do everything to delay this. So we'll see. As I said, the most reasonable, the most doable option right now seems like for the limited area of Gaza, a two-state solution. And I guess something along the lines, the same thing for West Bank, but that will not be for a long-term plan. There has to be a more reasonable, establishment there where Palestinians do not feel like refugees within their own land, who have been there for thousands from the beginning of time. So yes, let's see. Let's hope for this. It's a very good, probably only doable first step. But then let's not forget there will be more work after that, if that is ever established.
Mm-hmm. Thank you there. So, Ambassador, so we're talking about the future of Gaza here, and if we're bringing in international law, where does that leave a situation where Israel assumes full control of Gaza? And also, how would the world react if this was the path that Netanyahu went down and this was what we saw in Gaza?
Okay, so I was saying that we need to know what kind of occupation the Israeli authorities intend to do. Is it going to be a military occupation and a military administration of the Strait of Gaza, or is it going to be a reinstallation of the settlements and the settlers in Gaza that were actually expelled by the Israeli authorities back when Gaza was the self-rule of Gaza was given to the Palestinians? I am speaking out of experience. I was posted as Deputy Chief of Mission of the Spanish Embassy in Jordan right when these things were taking place. I was there between 93 and 96, and I've been to Gaza after that many times. I even had conversations with Yasser Arafat in Gaza, in the headquarters that he had next to the beach. I am one of the very few politicians, I was a politician then, I am not anymore, that actually has spent nights in Gaza, not just the day as so many other people do. One needs to understand what Gaza is really like. Gaza is 350 square kilometers, where 2.3 million people live, crowded, where the living conditions are extremely complicated. And the only way to make it viable is to have some safety corridors that link Gaza to the West Bank. The West Bank can only be viable in its turn if the settlements that are choking certain parts of the West Bank are removed or reduced. Of course, the ones that are surrounding Jerusalem, we know that that is a red line for the Israeli authorities, and they're never going to leave them. And one needs to understand, and I was listening to my interlocutor again in his response. I mean, if the two-state solution is the first step to what? What do we envisage? That there will be just one state and that the demographics of that state will eventually take over, and that there will not be a Jewish state and a Palestinian state? Do we think that a single state with two kinds of citizens is viable? I don't. I really don't. I know that it sounds very complicated to build a two-state solution when you have Gaza, and I was explaining the difficulties of it, that is isolated also with Egypt, and because Egypt does not allow the Gazans to move freely towards the Sinai. The reason being the regime of President al-Sisi strongly rejects Hamas, and they are deeply suspicious of any kind of terrorist penetration in their own country. This is one of the reasons why they have been so strict in not allowing the Gazans to move into Egyptian territory. So I would really want to know what is the second step, or what is the alternative to a two-state solution? Is it the elimination of the state of Israel? Is it that the whole state of Israel is going to become the Palestinian state? Or is it what the Palestinians, some parts of the Israeli political spectrum is saying, that there is already a Palestinian state, which is the Kingdom of Jordan, which is completely wrong, by the way. In Jordan, you have some Palestinians, which are believed to be the majority, but now you have Syrians and you have Iraqis, and you have a very important part of the population, maybe 45%, that are Transjordanians. That is non-Palestinian Arabs that are Judean. So it is extremely and you know, we can't play God like Sykes-Picot did back in the day, and this is something that the Arabs deeply resent. The Arabs have been colonized over and over again by many powers, not just the West, also the Ottoman Empire, by the way, not a fantastic colonizer either, by the way. So
can we have Mr. Erim respond to some of those comments, especially in regards to the two-state solution and the implications for Egypt and other Arab countries?
Yeah, of course, but let me just touch upon Mr. Ambassador's comment about Ottoman being a not successful colonizer.
Shall we keep it to Israel and Gaza for now? I'm sure that's a debate.
No, that's fine. But I mean, we're talking about historical facts. I don't think that you could find a single real historical book that ever labeled Ottoman as a colonizing empire. But again, that's Mr. Ambassador's opinion. I'll leave that with him.
Might have to ask the Arabs about that.
Sir, you mentioned your opinion, and I just mentioned mine. That's all. We could differ in our perspectives.
Let's roll back to Gaza now, gentlemen.
The thing is, I would even believe less of a chance of a single state solution. I don't know where Mr. Ambassador got that idea that I said something about that. I said right now the only viable, the only realistic approach is a two-state solution. Is it hard to establish? Of course it's hard to establish. Is it going to have a lot of bumps along the way? I am sure, and there's going to be a lot of pitfalls as well. what I see as right now, the only viable, reasonable, realistic solution, if it's ever could be established, would be a two-state solution. All I said at the end was that two-state solution, knowing the region, knowing the history, and knowing Israelis, I shouldn't say Israelis, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Knowing the Zionist approach that Bibi claims to represent for years now, that is going to be, I believe, impossible to sustain for a long period of time. So for now, to just bring at least some sort of a humane living conditions for the Palestinians in Palestine, I think this is the only choice that should be tried to achieve. And everybody, if everybody around the globe should really support this. All I said was, in the long run, there has to be other factors that have to be definitely measured very decisively, because even a two-state solution will not be, very sustainable there, at least for a long period of time. That is all the point that I made. Again, we're always skipping out on the actual the moral of the issue. We're talking about what to do about when a country that was actually established in the almost 50s, who came in and kicked everybody out of their land, the Palestinians, took over almost, I don't know, I think about 60 or also 70% of their land. And now we're discussing whether the rest of the land that's left over for Palestinians, which is a small amount of what they had in the beginning, should even be ruled by them, or should they be kicked out and put into a nice real estate development project. So right now, as I said again, two-state solution should be the only thing that everybody should work very hard for. The fact of the matter is, I understand Netanyahu's domestic legal problems. I understand his approach. I understand that even the citizens of Israel are not unified in how Bibi acts upon this. The problem is none of this, and none of the statements or the stands by the more, let's say, more morally more correct European nations has stopped even one child being killed by an IDF sniper in the last 30, 40 years.
So we're running out of time, gentlemen.
Nothing is stopping. Everything continues as is. Could there be maybe a possible reason to ease this down, to bring some kind of a peace to the region? Yes. And right now, the best option does seem to be the two-state solution. All I'm saying is it will not end there. It's going to be a work in progress for quite a period of time.
Now, I've got time for one more question from you, Ambassador. It's my final question, but if we can keep it brief, that would be great, as we're running out of time now. Ultimately, what we're talking about here is the future of Gaza. And where does this leave Hamas? Do you think a collapsed Hamas would leave a power vacuum, or would this actually be an opening for a new Palestinian leadership?
I think that the Palestinian National Authority, the PNA, needs to renew itself. I mean, we've seen that the same leadership in the Palestinian Authority for a good 40 years. And the newer generation has not been given a chance. It's true that it's not the most efficient or the most honest, if you want, of administrations. There are very serious cases of corruption. That is one of the reasons why the Fatah organization lost the election in Gaza in 2007, and there was a very good reason for it, because the corruption was rampant, and people were starving, and they were not well managed and administered. But this said, it is much better to have the Palestinian National Authority governing Gaza and the West Bank than Hamas. There is no doubt about that. The Palestinian Authority needs to be helped by the West, needs to be helped by the Israeli authorities, And some of the countries that have been sustaining the budget of the Palestinian authorities through the Israeli government, because this needs to be noted, that many people and many media have wrongfully accused some of the supporters of the administration of Gaza, even Gaza and the West Bank, of cooperating with the terrorist movement that obviously Hamas is. But the money that has been sent by countries like Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, or Qatar go to the Israeli government first, and it is the Israeli government that then distributes that money to the authorities locally. Lastly, the only way out of this is that Hamas does not come back into the picture, administering, managing, governing Gaza. And the only way out of this is by sending some kind of international force that is going to guarantee peace and stability in the region, in Gaza, for example. Definitely making a luxury resort of Gaza is not the solution to this problem.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here on Near News. It was great to talk to you both.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As we close this episode of Context, the picture remains deeply complex. Military victory does not guarantee strategic success. Full Israeli control of Gaza could entrench instability, deepen regional divides, and impose humanitarian responsibilities with no clear exit. The question now isn't just could Israel govern Gaza, but should it? Thanks for joining us and have a good afternoon.